Hello, Internet. What is the first thing the school should teach you? Probably how to learn. Oh, and by the way, welcome to the Empirical Sword. I'm Lore Master DLC79, and I happen to believe that school doesn't teach, at least not the way it's supposed to. And we have to take our education into our own hands until such a time that we can reform the school system so that it prepares people for surviving life. Unfortunately, right now, it's letting a lot of people down. People are just outright giving up on education and just living their lives, seeking entertainment. And if you pop over to my channel page, you'll notice that I do a lot of gaming content. This is why. Because I believe the people that I need to reach are more interested in entertainment than in education. So that's what that's all about. So what do I mean by learning how to learn? Is it even possible to learn how to learn? Well, yes and no. But see, here's the thing. I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that there are multiple ways of learning. The thing is, we're not equally good at all of them. Going back to the intelligence video, just like we have multiple kinds of intelligence, and we're really good at some, but not so good at others. The same thing applies to the different styles of learning, and well, different people break these up in different ways, and I'm probably going to give you my own personal spin on these. But I mean, the most traditional ways of learning are through reading and listening, and really, I think listening is kind of the most primal. Well, no, actually, no. I think kinesthetic. You're getting hands-on is like the most primal version of learning. You're actually getting your hands on tools and actually using them. And in fact, if you need to learn any kind of physical kind of skill, like how to hammer a nail, or how to play a video game, or at least how to use the controller bits of playing a video game, then kinesthetic is almost the only way to learn. But after that, I believe we developed the listening version of learning, or mode of learning. The oral history and whatnot of tribal life, and things like that. And in addition to that, here in modern society, we also have writing and speaking. Speaking may actually also be fairly primal, because speaking and listening kind of go hand in hand almost. And I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I've noticed that extroverts tend to do better with the speaking mode of learning. They tend to learn more when they're speaking and interacting with people, whereas introverts like me, we tend to be better at the listening kind of thing, which kind of explains why I say things, and then I kind of pause and look off into space, and then I say more things. It's the speaking doesn't exactly come natural to me, but unfortunately, it actually is a fairly efficient method of communicating information, at least for me. Writing tends to get a little tedious, and I kind of tend to group writing in with the whole kinesthetic learning mode, style. I'm not even entirely sure what word I'm using. I group it in with the kinesthetic, because you're actually, I know a lot of people who use the internet and social media will probably not completely identify with this analogy. But with the kinesthetic, with my reasoning for linking writing with kinesthetic is in my day, we had pen and paper, or pencil and paper. I mean, you have the paper and you have the pencil, and you're physically writing. You're physically altering the environment. And I know pencil and paper still exist. I mean, I use them, so I know they still exist. But we kind of live in a world now that's more keyboard and more thumb board, thumb pad, touch phones and IMs and stuff. I'll feel old now. But yeah, it's almost like pencil and paper are kind of going out of style. And I'm actually going to recommend not letting that happen, but let's be patient a little bit. So yeah, those are the see, listening, speaking, reading, writing, kinesthetic, and then the writing and kinesthetic, that they're very, very connected. And yeah, if you're learning a physical skill, like if you're learning surgery, you need the kinesthetic learning. But if all you're doing is putting information in your brain, and I phrase that horribly because that almost dismisses the value of putting information, and really putting information in your brain is like the most valuable thing you can do. If you can do something to put more information in your brain to get more knowledge, do it. Because that is the most valuable thing you can do in your entire life. But when we're talking about that kind of learning, kinesthetic is actually kind of, it's not completely, it has a value, but not necessarily the highest. Really the ones you're looking at are reading, writing, speaking, and listening in that case. And unfortunately, we're not all good at all of them. I mean, when I was younger, I was better at learning by reading. That kind of gave me an unfair advantage in school, because just think about how much school assigns reading. Read this chapter, and read this chapter, and read this chapter, and read this chapter, read this chapter, read this entire book, and now tell me what the book is about. Depending on who you or what sources you use and how they divide up the different styles of learning, reading may or may not be one of the rarest methods of learning. I mean, some sources say it's the most common, but they may be biased. I mean, people read, but they don't necessarily retain the information. So it's question mark is what it is. But school has a tendency to not utilize all four methods, and it's almost like people get punished for not being able to learn effectively by reading, because that's almost all you do in school. At least that's almost all I did in school. It's just read and read and read and read, and then listen to someone who just barely knows the material, just spouting off facts and information without even relating them together. And that kind of gets in. This is sort of getting into personality types and how my particular brain works. And just to get off on that aside, one of my college professors was like, you don't need to understand this information to memorize it. I mean, I didn't say anything, but I'm thinking, I kind of do need to understand it. I didn't even know I was an INTJ back then. But even then I knew I need to be able to connect this to that and connect all of these things to things I already know in order to remember them. If I can't do that, it's like it won't stay in my brain. And really, that's another part of figuring out how you most effectively learn. Do you need to understand it, or does rote memorization actually work for you? Because I can tell you for a fact that rote memorization does not work for me. It works for other people, but not for me. Mnemonic devices, they work for other people, but not for me. That's kind of one of the self-awareness things that you kind of need. Knowing what works for you and what doesn't. Do you learn most effectively by reading, or do you learn more effectively by speaking and interacting with people? Or maybe you're a listener, or maybe actually do better by writing. Uh, now, in my school experience, I kind of figured out I was, a preferred reader early on. So what I started doing around the high school level was I just started taking tons and tons and tons of notes. If the teacher said it, write it down. If it's on the board, write it down. I've even gotten the habit of like writing in the margins of the books, even though they don't want you to do that. But I did it anyway. But anyway, I kind of started noticing about the high school, the college level, that when I was going over my notes afterward to study for tests, it's like, I already get this. It's like, just by writing it down, I remembered it. And eventually I got to the point where I'm not even taking notes anymore because I can just sit in a lecture listening to the professor, spouting off things, and I don't even need to write it down now. I can remember it. So I started out as a preferred reader, and through practice at taking tons and tons of notes, I turned myself into being able to learn by writing, and eventually just I mean, keep in mind this was like let's see, elementary school. That's almost a decade about of actually being in classes and forcing myself to learn. So that's another thing. Learning is not a passive exercise. It is active. You will actually have to put forth effort to do it. And then that's why a lot of people don't do it, because most people are lazy. I lost my train of thought. That happens sometimes. Yeah, through sheer practice of almost a decade of going to classes and listening and writing and listening and writing and listening and writing, I kind of trained myself to be able to learn by listening. And well, now I'm still a preferred reader. I mean, you never get worse. Well, mostly you never get worse at your preferred method, but I actually got better at learning by writing, and I got better at learning by listening. And today, it's like I can still learn by reading, but it's so much more convenient to watch, like a video on YouTube that teaches whatever it is I'm into. So if you are only good at one style of learning, you can get better at others just by sheer practice. You just have to keep trying to learn, and just keep in mind it is an active process, and it is unfortunately a process. You can't just flip a switch and hey, I know this now. And the human brain unfortunately doesn't work like that. You actually do have to put forth an effort, and there is unfortunately a certain amount of repetition. It's really, one of the more effective, more kind of advanced techniques is don't focus on just one style of learning. Don't just sit there and reading a book. Don't just sit there listening to a video, or you use many styles of learning as you can. If I'm reading a book, I'm also like taking notes in the book. Again, writing in the margin. But if I pay for a book, I can write in the margins if I want. It's my book now. Sort of. I mean, I own the copy, but that's beside the point. But yeah, I'm writing in the margins. Sometimes I'll even like pace around the room. I tend to do that sometimes. I pace around the room and I actually speak the book out loud, listening to myself. Getting the speaking and the listening at the same time, while writing in the book, while reading the book. That's like all four learning styles right there in one. And again, it's very, very active. You have to pay attention. You can't let yourself like get distracted and start, which unfortunately is easy to do when you're watching a video. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have zoned out several times by now. Like, why won't he look at the camera? Why is he looking over there? Video is unfortunately very distracting, especially on a platform like YouTube, which has ads here and here and here and here and here. But yeah, these things should be the first things taught in school. I mean, you're supposed to spend your entire academic career learning. So why are you not taught about the different styles of learning, and that you may not be effective at all of them, at least not yet, and that you have to practice at them to get better? Why are you not taught these things on day one if you're expected to spend at least 13 years learning? And really it comes down to the fact that elementary school and high school is not intended to actually teach you anything, is to train you to be a good factory worker. And good factory workers don't necessarily need to learn anything, they just need to follow instructions and do as they're told, excuse me. and so that's technically why that is, but times are changing. I mean, eventually I did learn these things, like first day of college, which is optional for most people. So it is eventually taught in the modern school system, but it should be taught earlier. So yeah, that is how you learn most effectively. You figure out your number one first, and practice that, and then springboard off that to practice the others. Eventually you get better at practicing all those others, which means that eventually I'll get better at speaking, maybe. In about 10 years. But yeah, so with that said, so yeah, if you found this interesting and if you got something out of this, don't be selfish. I'm sure you know of someone else in the world who would get something out of this as well, so share. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon as well, so you can be notified whenever I drop these videos. And yeah, this playlist will continue growing slowly, and there's always going to be another one, I hope. I mean, as long as I have ideas, then there will be more, and I'll see you in the next one. How you most affect, or how different